Well, the holidays are a busy time of year, aren't they? Remember to stay thankful in this time, okay? Busyness will steal your joy faster than anything. It's crazy. The stores are crazy. The people are crazy. Everything is crazy. And just so much to remember. It's almost impossible to feel like you've got it all under control during this time. So just remember to be thankful whatever happens. And remember to make the time to prioritize prayer and reading the Bible. It really does make a difference in this time. I mean, in January you feel great, and all the hectic is behind you, and you're like, I'm going to start out on a new foot. But then, by December time, it's getting a little crazy. So just remember that, it's not the end of the world. It's just the holiday rush. So we are in Christmas time. Oh boy, oh we. Ooh. It's not that I don't like Christmas. I love Christmas. I love the decorations. Maybe not as much as other people love the decorations. I love the music. I love everything. I'm not really one of those humbugs. The thing I don't like about Christmas is just how hectic it gets. It's just, you go to the store and all you want is one simple thing, and they're out of everything, and everybody's trying to run you over. And it gets scary. Pretty much like a week before Thanksgiving all the way to the end of the year. I'd rather stay home during that time. But during Christmas times comes things like Christmas movies. Growing up, we always had this rule that we could only watch Christmas movies from December 1st to the end of the month. Then when I got married, we pushed that back and we said, okay, the day after Thanksgiving, it's all's fair in love and war. Pretty much just watch Christmas movies. And, we pretty much stuck to that. And so you have all the fun Christmas movies you have to watch every single year, and even if you don't like it, it's kind of like an obligation, right? So you got like the older ones like White Christmas and It's a Wonderful Life. Then you got the ones that everybody watches, and I don't know why, like Jingle All the Way, and we just watch these movies and we're not real sure. Well, one of the movies that it seems like everybody watches every year is Home Alone. I'm assuming everybody here has seen this movie, right? You've all seen Home Alone, right? Okay, good. Good. Just make sure we're on. I mean, sometimes you find craziest things, so I just figured I'd ask. But have you ever thought, what is Home Alone actually about? Like, what is it really about? Is it about a boy who's a little bit of a stinker who gets left at home and he's just trying to, he has this character development of how's he going to react? Does he really hate his family? Or is it about a mom who's trying to be the best mom she can, and she's a bit of a hot mess, and she's just trying to get it together, and she's trying to find a way back to her son? What is it really about? Who's the main character? And I think when you ask those kinds of questions, it's not as easy a lot of times as it seems. And so for the next 2 weeks, we're going to look at the parable of the prodigal. A parable is basically a short story, usually, that has a main point. And when you're looking at the Bible's parables, there's a lot of times when the main point isn't quite so clear. Right? I mean, for instance, there's one where Jesus says that is praising somebody for being shrewd. So what's that all about? Well, as a general rule, and we're going to look at the prodigal over the next 3 weeks, but as a general rule, look for as many main characters as there are in a parable. That's how many points there are. So, for instance, in the story of the prodigal, or the prodigal son, there are 3 main characters. There's obviously the prodigal son, there's the father, and there's the brother. So, we should look there then for 3 main points. And when you talk about the prodigal, this is a very popular figure. It's something that's used in pop culture. People use it in things. Oh, they're a prodigal. It's something that's part of our culture. Everybody knows it. It's like the Samaritan, right? Everybody knows, even if they don't know the Bible, they know about it. But once again, when we're looking at the story of the prodigal, what really is the main point? Who's the main character? As we're going to look at today, the story of the prodigal son goes from verse 11 through verse 31. It's 20 verses. But the prodigal son is only in half of them. So is he really the main character? Well, maybe it's the father. Well, the father isn't in all of them either. And you get a lot of questions on this. It doesn't really make sense. And when we're going to look at this over the next couple of weeks, how for the Jewish audience, it makes even less sense. This would have been a story that kind of made them a little bit mad. So we're going to look at this and just kind of break it apart. But the story starts actually in chapter 15, verse 1, That's not where this parable starts, but it's where the setup for the story starts. And the Pharisees are all upset at Jesus. The Pharisees are, these religious leaders, or in church, the church head dogs and all this. And they're upset at Jesus because he's eating with all these sinners and tax collectors and, not good people. People that we definitely don't think fit the bill. I'm not going to speak too loudly here, but if any of you have me over for dinner at the same time that you have an IRS agent, I'm not coming. So, the Pharisees are all upset with Jesus because he's got these sinners around him. And so in response to this, Jesus does not look at them and say, "Listen here, bub." Instead, he tells 3 interconnected stories. And everybody knows these stories. Even if you didn't grow up in church, you know them. The story about the lost sheep. Who wouldn't go out to look for the lost sheep? Yeah, okay, all right. And then there's a story of the lost coin. A woman loses her money and she's searching everywhere in her house for it, right? And then the third one is the story of the lost son. And as you look at this, you can very obviously see a main theme here. And these are all pretty common examples. Sheep and coins. That's something everybody would have experienced. But then you get to the lost son, and it's a little bit more of a hot topic. And it's like, okay. And also, if you look at the themes themselves, it gets a little bit more climactic at the end. Losing your sheep, that's something that everybody thought about. Losing your coin, this is something everybody would have thought about. Losing your son, in the culture, it's not that you wouldn't have thought about that. It would have been more of harsh in the treatment of the sons, and not really something that you would have related the loss of a son or a coin to people who you saw as sinners. You wouldn't have connected the dots here. So let's kind of move through here. We're going to read through the parable. We're going to read through the whole thing, but we're not going to look at the whole thing today. And then we're just going to do the same thing over the next 2 weeks, so we all kind of follow along here. He also said, a man had 2 sons. This is verse 11 of chapter 15. The younger of them said to his father, "Father, give me the share I have coming to me." So he distributed the assets to them. Not many days later, the younger son gathered together all he had and traveled to a distant country, where he squandered his estate in very foolish living. After he had spent everything, a severe famine struck that country, and he had nothing. Then he went to work for one of the citizens of that country, who sent him into his fields to feed pigs. Now he longed to eat his fill from the pods that the pigs were eating, but no one would give him anything. When he came to his senses, he said, "How many of my father's hired workers have more than enough food, and here I am dying of hunger? I know what I'll do. I'll get up, go to my father, and say to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and in your sight. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired workers.'" This makes sense. It seems like a very reasonable thing. So he got up and went to his father. But while the son was still a long way off, his father saw him, was filled with compassion. He ran, threw his arms around his neck, and kissed him. The son has said to him, "Father, I have sinned against heaven, and in your sight I'm no longer worthy to be called your son." But the father told his servants, "Quick, bring out the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Then bring the fattened calf and slaughter it, and let's celebrate with a feast. Because the son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found." So they began to celebrate. Now his older son was in the field. As he came near the house, he heard music and dancing. So he summoned one of the servants, questioning what these things meant. "Your brother is here," he told him, "and your father has slaughtered the fattened calf because he has him back safe and sound." Then he became angry and didn't want to go in. So his father came out and pleaded with him. But he replied to his father, "Look, I have been slaving many years for you, and I have never disobeyed your orders, yet you never gave me a goat so I could celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours came, who has devoured your assets with prostitutes, you slaughtered the fattened calf for him." "Son," he said to him, "you are always with me, and everything I have is yours." But we had to celebrate and rejoice, because this brother of yours was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. Wow, powerful story. But once again, who's the main story? Who's the main character here? Well, in parables, remember, in parables, for every main character, there's a main point. So there's actually 3 main characters, 3 main points. So today we're going to look at the first of those three main points, and that's focusing mostly on the son, the what's called the prodigal son. And there's a lot of people in recent years who've written books about this kind of stuff. So plenty more out there, but let's kind of focus in on this. So we'll look back at verse 12. It says, "The younger of them said to his father, 'Father, give me the share of the estate.'" Now, a lot of this story, I think, is lost on culture. You know, we are in a different world, really, than they were back then. "I have coming to me, so he distribute the assets to them." And so as we're going, try to forget the things you know about this story. And, try to see it with fresh eyes. Pretend you've never read the story before. In this Jewish culture, you would get the inheritance after the father's death. Always. So you wouldn't get his estate before he died. So you have to understand that in this culture, for the son to say this, in essence, he's saying something along the lines of this: "I wish you were dead." This is not something that you should take lightly. What he's saying here is something that is very much so a little bit, extreme. This is something that you would not expect from your son. And right now, the audience is already thinking, what? If you're familiar with the law, you know very well that this is basically grounds for the father to take his son out and stone him. So this is not something to take lightly. This is something that's very, very serious. And the Jewish audience who's listening, remember the Pharisees, they're listening. The Jewish audience who's listening to this, they are probably thinking, well, something bad's going to happen to him. And they're hoping for it. So then you get to verse 13. It says, "Not many days later, the younger son gathered together all he had and traveled to a distant country where he squandered his estate in foolish living." So there's a lot of stuff going on in this verse. There's so much. First off, so it was normal for Jewish men to decide who got what before they died. That was normal. I mean, we see that happen all throughout the Bible. It was normal in the culture. That's totally fine. But they didn't actually get it. You would just say, "Hey, when I'm gone, this is yours." But here we have a big oddity. And the oddity is that not only did he separate it, the son actually got it as well, which should not have happened. And then not only did he get it, but he spent it all. Another huge oddity. None of this really makes sense to the Jewish audience because it's pretty much illegal for him to do this. For the son to take the estate and then squander it. This is illegal. It's not good. Not only that, but even outside of Jewish circles in the ancient world, squandering wealth like this was seen as a grave immorality. So that's not even in a Jewish circle. That's kind of an ancient world thing. Is to squander like this. So nobody's on his side at this point. The Jewish, the Greeks, nobody's on his side. Like, this guy definitely needs whatever's coming to him. Because all that estate was still the father's, but even if the father had died, to squander your wealth like that was just no bueno. No bueno. And what strikes me as odd is, did you notice, and I didn't realize it until this last week and I was reading it again, that the son does not leave immediately. Did you see that? I never saw that before. Not many days later, the younger son gathered together all he had and traveled to a distant country. It wasn't immediately. He left in stages. And there's a few things, and maybe I'm reading too much into this, but first off, in your life, remember that whenever someone's going to cause a problem, they most oftentimes take their time leaving. Okay? Have you ever been in one of those relationships, maybe when you were younger and you were dating, where things just weren't really vibing, if you get what I'm saying? And, but then it seems like you try to hold on to it and things go from bad to worse, and you know what I'm talking about? It happens a lot. Those kind of tense situations. There'll be someone at work who hates the boss, hates the job. They spend all their time complaining, yet they're still there every day. It seems like you know that they're going to leave. It's just a matter of time, but they won't just leave. They got to drag it out. You guys ever experienced this in your life? I know I personally have. But also, I would say that bitterness always comes in stages. Nobody ever wakes up and says, "I'm bitter," right? It comes in stages. You wake up, you're a little bit offended, but then you do this thing where you tell yourself, "I'm going to be okay. I'm just going to forgive and forget. But then the next day you're just as irritated, and so your attitude kind of goes like this. You know what I mean? Where you're not quite giving up on the situation because you think, I'm going to be the bigger person, but then you keep having this like just irritated feeling. You can't really seem to get past it. And, just that bitterness comes. And it seems like that might be what's happening here with the son. Maybe I'm reading too much into this. But you can definitely see that there's this progression in the son. First, he's just asking for the state. No harm there. Okay, then he's taking the state. Now he's getting his stuff together, and he's going far, far away. So you can definitely see that the kind of progression. And also, something that I thought was kind of interesting in the story is it says very clearly here, and traveled to a distant country. It doesn't just say he traveled out of the area. He went very, very far away. And you kind of see this attitude of, I want to do whatever I want. Ever told yourself that you're going to be happier somewhere else? If I just go over there, then I'll be happier? You can obviously see that the son is not content. He's gradually trying to get more and leave farther and farther away. So there's this kind of thing that happens in us, I think, where we just kind of keep thinking that there's always somewhere greener, somewhere else. But also, I think that in the church we do this a little bit too, because I shouldn't say in the church. Well, yeah, in the church, but among religious persons, I feel like we do this because we'll do something like this. Okay. Well, I want to leave. I want to leave. I want to leave. So we keep praying, God, please let me leave. God, please let me leave. And so then God stops trying to work on you because you've made up your mind to leave. And so then people take this as this clear sign from God that God has finally allowed me to leave. He has freed me of this burden. And we're all kinds of happy. Meanwhile, God's saying, well, no, that's not really what I had for you, but you're probably going to do whatever you want to do anyways. And, it's it's the answer we want to hear. And so we tell ourselves these things like this. Well, God called me to move to this place. Here's the thing. God will sometimes call you to move to a place. He will. Right? You guys know this, right? Didn't he call Abraham to move to a place? But typically, he won't call you to a place. He'll call you to a thing. You understand what I'm saying? Like, for instance, did he call Abraham to go to the land that he would give him for the sole reason of calling him to a place? No, he called him to a place to fulfill a purpose. God calls us to purposes. If your entire desire in moving to a place is just to be free of the burden, to be gone, it's short-lived because you're going to go to the other place and there's going to be a problem eventually there too. This is the problem with hopping from church to church. This is the problem from hopping from marriage to marriage. This is the problem from... You see what I mean? There's always going to be some problem that develops wherever you go. It's always going to happen. And so you see that happening definitely here with the son. He's got this idea, and maybe he's sugarcoating. Who knows? We don't really know. I don't think it's important that we read that much into it, but there's this idea, I'm going to be happier somewhere else. So we get to verse 14, and it says this. After he had spent everything, and we can pick up from the stories from the clues of the story that this father was a very wealthy man. So for him to spend all of it, this is kind of a big deal. After he had spent everything, a severe famine struck that country, and he had nothing. Absolutely nothing. Well, things have definitely changed for him. But did you notice that everything was fine? Everything was fine in his life, how he was living, what he was doing. Everything was fine for him when times were good. But as soon as times went bad, he wasn't prepared. His lifestyle was fine until it wasn't. And you might say, well, that's a stupid thing to say, obviously. But here's the thing. And let's read the verse one more thing, because I'm trying to get to a bigger point here. After he had spent everything, a severe famine struck that country, and he had nothing. There was no big sign that came to him, right, that he shouldn't do this. There was nobody in his corner saying, hey, you shouldn't do this, you should stay with your father, there's nobody warning him against his course of action. There's no light from above where he encounters God like Paul would. Nothing. It's just, hey, Dad, give me your stuff, I'm out of here. A little bit jarring there, and then we really don't even see much of a encouragement or condemnation from God or from Jesus or anything. The story just happens. And then all of a sudden you have this famine. And so for him, it seemed like everything was fine until one day he woke up and it wasn't. A lot of times what I hear from people is everything's fine, I don't need God. Basically, the idea is that the purpose of having God in your life is to either bail you out of a problem or to bring excess blessings on your life. And so by turning to God, you won't have problems in your life. And I don't necessarily blame people who think this, because oftentimes people will try to do like the used car salesman with witnessing to people, where we try to sell people on Jesus. If you come to Jesus, all your wildest dreams will come true. But it's not like that, is it? Rather, when you come to Jesus, more often than not, things get actually harder. You have to die to self. That's a daily battle. I'm in my 30s and I haven't mastered it yet. Anybody in their 80s who's mastered it? 70s, 60s, 50s, 40s? Okay, that's kind of what I thought. See, it's one of those things that is a lifelong battle. No, and everything is not. That's not the reason why we get with God. You know, God isn't there so we can live in comfort. And this is something that people who are saved and people who are not saved, I don't feel like fully grasp it. You know, because I'll show you proof. Okay, when something bad happens, you say, God, why me? Why did you allow this to happen? Isn't that what we're saying? Isn't that what we're saying? That, hey, you're supposed to have me live in comfort. I've done all the right things. I've checked off all the right boxes. Now your side of the agreement is that you don't let these things happen to me. I was actually talking to a guy, it doesn't really matter where, but he was a drug addict. And he managed to get off of drugs himself. He didn't get saved. He didn't get into the church. He didn't get into a rehab program. He just willed himself out of it and got out of drugs. Really an amazing effort. I applaud him. Good job. But this was the thing that he said to me after that. He said, I'm good. I don't need to go to church. I'm off of drugs. I got my life together. I'm good. And there was this idea that in what he was saying, that basically God is only there if you can't get there yourself. You get what I'm saying? But here's the thing. God's there because we are rebels by our very nature. We are rebels against God. When we're saved, we're rebels in our heart. When we're not saved, we are rebels in our heart. We struggle every single day. Paul said it like this: I do the thing I don't want to do, and I don't do the thing that I do want to do. That is our nature. We are rebels to God. That's why we need God, because we are rebels. Being a religious person, being a spiritual person, that doesn't solve the problem, because I am still a rebel. Right? I can be as spiritual as I want. I can be as religious as I want. I can go to every single service at every single church, even the cultic ones. I can do everything and still not be good enough, because my relationship with God is not about being good enough or something that I do to become a good citizen or something I do to get my life in order. It's because I am a rebel to God. And I need forgiveness because I am a rebel in my heart. But this is a conversation you hear very, very often in ministry. And to a lesser degree, we do something similar in the church. And maybe it's not on the same tier, but it's a similar kind of thing. Have you noticed that when things are going really well in your life, or when you get excessively busy, either or, your prayer life kind of diminishes, and your reading of the Word kind of diminishes? Because everything's okay, or I just don't really have time for it. One or the other. Have you noticed that in your lives? It happens to me. Did I mention we're in the holiday season? It's probably going on right now, actually. And it happens to us even more so there. But then disaster comes, and we're not really prepared for the disaster because we haven't been staying in the Word, we haven't been staying in prayer. Disaster comes and we feel off base. So something similar is happening here too. He wasn't prepared when the disaster came because everything was fine. It's like those people who I talk to. I don't need God because everything is fine. Well, what happens when it's not? What happens when it's not? Well, I'll worry about it then. Okay, but in the meantime, you're still a rebel to God. So verses 15 through 16 go on to say this. Then he went to work for one of the citizens of that country, who sent him into his fields to feed pigs. Red flag. We'll come back to that, but red flag. He longed to eat his fill from the pods that the pigs were eating, but no one would give him anything. Okay. So I don't know if you caught it, but you know when we were kids and they told us that he was feeding the pigs and he ate from what he was giving the pigs? That's not what it said. Okay? let's clarify what actually happens in this story. He gets hired. He goes out into the field and feeds the pigs, and then he sees the food that they're eating. He says, that looks good out there. I want some of that. So then he goes and asks people for some for himself, and they say no. Okay, let's put all that. Maybe that's not important. I'll get back to you later. But either way, it's important to know the details before we plow too far ahead on this. So as you're reading this, it kind of seems like he's being unfairly paid, is what it seems like. Because if he was hired to do the job, he should have been paid probably that same day for this kind of day labor. So he should have had money or something. So it seems like he's being unfairly paid. We don't know exactly what's going on, but there might be some kind of, his boss kind of gypping him or whatever you want to say. I don't know if that's a good term, but either way, some form of he's not being treated correctly by his boss. And then to make the situation worse, he can't even get other people to give him the pig's food. I know if somebody asked me for my dog's food, I'd say, bro, you don't have any idea how much dog food costs? Bro, and that's if you get the cheap stuff, man. And nowadays they have all kinds of organic stuff with, real chicken and all this stuff. I'm like, I don't know, the cardboard seemed to work perfectly fine for my dog growing up, but whatever, everybody has their own, huh? And so then we get to this, and he's gone far away, trying to get away from the problem, his dad and all this different stuff. I'm going to go out, strike my own path, do whatever I want, live however I want. And he finds himself in a place that is very much so removed from the culture that he grew up. My wife gets sometimes updates me on those stories about the Amish people, where they'll go out and leave their Amish community and just completely change and just go off the deep end on the other side. And I kind of think something there with this. But he's here working for pigs, which for Jews, which I'm sure most of you know this, for Jews, pigs are detestable. Don't touch that. Don't get around that. So this young man is getting what he deserves. And all the Jews who are listening to the story are thinking, this story can end. He got what he deserves. Good riddance. Ha-ha. Justice has prevailed. Mm-hmm. He's obviously outside of the Jewish community because they've got pigs there, so he's not around the Jewish community. He's been ostracized. There's no one there to pick him up. Ha ha ha. The story can end. Everything has resolved perfectly fine. But we're not even halfway through the story. We haven't even made it halfway. What is going on, Jesus? You missed your cue. You were telling us a good story about how, basically every evil person gets what they deserve. Good riddance to them. The sinners and tax collectors, they can all go and, get out of Israel. Then we get to verse 17 through 19, and it says this. And obviously the main point is not really he got what he deserved, but it's what people would have thought that's what Jesus was getting at. When he came to his senses, what? The story goes on. He said, how many of my father's hired workers have more than enough food, and here I am dying of hunger? I'll get up, go to my father, and say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and in your sight. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me one of your hired workers. And this is where the audience would have lost it. Completely lost it. Because here's the issue. What a lazy, spoiled, entitled brat. That's what the Jews were thinking. Nowadays we read this and we think, haha, he had a change of heart. That is not how the ancient world would have heard this. The ancient world would have heard this. After shaming and disgracing his father's name, squandering his wealth, now he wants to go running home to dad and basically have dad fix everything. He hasn't learned a single thing, and he's going to be relieved from this burden. Oh, how frustrating. Everybody likes a redemption arc, right? But the Jews didn't hear that in this story. What they heard is, he's going to get off scot-free. Don't let this happen. No, you don't know what you're doing to me, Jesus. It's like when you're reading a really good book and you get to the last fourth of it, or eighth of it, and people start dying and things start happening and you're not excited. Like, think something along the lines of Divergent or something, Is that still a sore button? But anyways, there's nothing about the story that a Jew would like. Nothing about it. And you have to understand that in an honor-shame society, everything you did reflected on your father's name, which was his reputation, everything about him, right? Even after he died, You were a reflection of your father. It was the name, the reputation. When we minister to people in the name of Jesus, that's not something that we just stick on the end of a sentence. I'm praying whatever I want in the name of Jesus. That's not the idea. In the name of Jesus means according to his authority, under his supervision, according to his plans and purposes, in his name and reputation. I am praying in Jesus' reputation, which means my prayers are going to be in line with the Father's will. That's what that means. It's not just some cute thing that we lop on the end of a prayer. But here we see in the honor shame society, this son seems to have no shame. This kind of disgrace would have been grounds for beating or worse. And furthermore, there's the big question of, does the son mean it or not? Because it really, really, really seems like he's trying to manipulate his father. He's trying to just weasel his way back in so that he can get paid better because he's tired of working for this guy with the pigs. He's just trying to manipulate his father. And right about here is probably where the Pharisees are about dying. They're rolling their eyes. They're very upset, and we see that in the next chapter that comes up. They are actively, read forward in the story, the Pharisees now take to actively mocking Jesus while he's talking. He's talking, and here they are over here actively mocking him, scoffing at the things that he's saying. So obviously they're upset. Let's keep going. We get to verses 20 through 21, and things get real, y'all. They get real, okay? And this isn't even the highlight of the story. We'll have to wait a couple weeks to get to the highlight. But so he got up and went to his father. Okay, he's got this plan. Everything's good. But while the son was still a long way off, his father saw him, and the story changes what's supposed to happen in the Jews' eyes. They are not happy with the son. And now, they're not very happy with the father either. And was filled with compassion for this undeserving scumbag who's trying to manipulate him. What is going on, Jesus? Get it together. This isn't how it's supposed to end. He ran, threw his arms around his neck, and kissed him. And the son said to him, Father, I've sinned against heaven, and in your sight I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. End. Did you remember what he rehearsed? Make me a slave, right? Make me a servant in your household. Where was that? Where did it go? It's no longer there. Which leaves us with a few interesting things to ponder. The first is, did he have a change of heart? Maybe he was walking there. Maybe he wanted to change his tactics. He's walking there and he's thinking, this is a far away. Maybe I'd be better off if I did this. Does he maybe have a change of heart? Is he just emotional because he's been traveling, he's tired, he's lost everything, and then he sees his father come out to him? Is that it? Or does he just feel shame at seeing his father? I think what happened is his father ran up to him, and it was at that moment that he really had a change of heart, because he saw the father's compassion. I would argue that he planned the speech just like he said it from the get-go, but at the sight of his father, disgracing himself to come to him, that changed it. I think it is actually encountering the grace of the Father that changed the whole story. I don't think he was sorry until this moment right here, when he was encountered with the Father's compassion. Then I think that there was a change of heart. And I think the story backs us up too. And there's 10 more verses to this story. We've only gone halfway. But the son isn't in any of them. Don't we call this the parable of the prodigal son? Right? He's not even there for half of it. That's next week, and then a week after that's a problem. So who was the prodigal son to the audience? The people who are listening to Jesus, they're sitting there listening to him talk. For them, who is a prodigal son? We all know nowadays who our own prodigal sons are, right? Maybe somebody who grew up in our household that doesn't love Jesus as an adult and we want them to get saved. Maybe just somebody out in the community. Who knows? We all have our own prodigal son. Who in the world was the prodigal son for the original audience. For them back then, what did this mean? What's going on? And for that, we have to go back to the beginning of this whole thing that started this. Verses 1 and 2 of chapter 15. All the tax collectors and sinners were approaching to listen to him. And the Pharisees and scribes were complaining. Foreshadowing, that's going to come back up. Keep that in your hat for 2 weeks from now. This man welcomes sinners and eats with them. So for the Jews, who is the prodigal specifically in the book of Luke, the prodigal that is being spoken of is the lost Jews of Israel. That's who the prodigal is for the original audience. Not just the lost, generally speaking. We're not talking about the Jew and the Greeks and the Greeks and the Romans. We're not talking about any of the pagans. We are only talking about the lost Jews of Israel. He's talking specifically about the tax collectors and sinners of Israel. Okay. So, obviously God seeks to save the lost. That's abundantly clear throughout the Bible. Obviously God desires that all be saved. That is abundantly clear in the Bible. We're not arguing against that. But the main point here, in this part of Scripture, is apparently God's people who have gone astray. They knew, and they left. They knew the law. They knew God's word. They knew God's will. They simply didn't follow it. Now, it's right around here that I anticipate at least 1 or 2 or 3 people saying, that's good and well. That was a very interesting history lesson. That's wonderful. I'm a Christian, though, and these verses don't have much for me. Well, I hear what you're saying or thinking, and I want to kind of help us apply that from then to here. Let's bring it forward 2,000 years. The first thing that I'd like to say is you might find yourself in a really good place today. Things might be okay. If you find yourself in a really good place, prepare yourself with your Father's wealth. Your Father's wealth is available to you. It's there. Not for you to take and squander, for you to take and grow from. So if you are in a place where things are going good, great. Prepare. Prepare. Your Father's wealth. What is it that he said to the older brother? He said, do you guys remember? The whole time that you were here, it was open to you. Remember? So maybe you don't really relate to the prodigal son who's gone off and really jumped off the deep end, but all the more, be prepared with your Father's wealth. It's there available. Don't squander your days. Be prepared. We're getting ready to go into a new year, getting ready to go through the holidays. Be prepared. You don't know what's going to happen. You don't know when disaster will strike. And even if it doesn't strike, it's better to walk in the riches of the Father. Even if you never have another bad thing happen to you, it's still better. Draw closer before you need to be closer. What we do is we hit a rough situation and we say, oh God, where are you? I need you. Meanwhile, we haven't been preparing. Think of it like this. When the floods hit, there were no sandbags, were there? And so things got flooded, right? But then after the floods hit, they started putting up sandbags for if the second day had the flooding again. You remember that? They said, well, we might have a second day of flooding. So here's these sandbags, put them up. Go get them, do whatever you can. They were doing the same thing in Verdosa too. They were trying to do anything to prepare for the flood. But if we were prepared the whole time for the flood, which obviously who would do that, right? It's not going to flood in Roswell. But if we had been prepared the whole time, nothing would have happened from the flood, would it have? And that's kind of what I'm getting at. It's not that you can always be prepared, but as Christians, we are walking in the Father's wealth. It's open to us. We can be prepared in the Father's wealth. Not that disaster won't strike, but that when disaster strikes, we won't be so blown off guard. I know for myself, I long to be in such a place of intimacy with the Father that when things come, it's just another distraction of buzzing in my ears. Wouldn't that be wonderful? And I'm not there yet. I'll tell you if I ever get there. Maybe you find yourself in a bad place, though. And I'm not talking about you've lost your salvation. I'm not talking about that. Although I think that if you are listening to this and you're not saved, I think this still applies. But, you're saved, everything's fine there, but you maybe have done something, or something's happened that you just can't forgive yourself, you really can't move on from, right? I know that for me, there are specific things where I've messed up big in my life, real big. And I still to this day wonder, is this my fault? Is this God bringing by punishment years later? Is this somehow, you know what I mean? Ever been there? When you did something real stupid, and years pass, and every single time that something comes up, you think, it's because God never forgave me. It's because I messed up too big. Have you ever thought that? Have you ever had that happen? So maybe you find yourself in that kind of a place. Whatever you've done, though, we're better off with the Father's wealth than in sitting in our woe and misery. Whatever you've done. Isn't that exactly what the son said? He was just being prudent at this point. He came to his senses and he's being prudent. If I already have to live like a slave, isn't it better to live in my Father's wealth than it is to live here in this pig nastiness? I mean, pigs aren't really the cleanest of animals, you know. Kind of stink real bad. So whatever has happened, it's better. Let's say that God does hate you. Let's say that you messed up too big. God will never forgive you. You're going to carry it for the rest of your life until you die. Okay, all right. Isn't it better than to dwell in the tower of the Lord? Read the book of Lamentations, and he says this. It's our fault that this happened. You're the one who's punished us for this. You're my only hope. He's literally turning to the one who caused him the destruction. You get what I'm saying? So even if it is, something that's irredeemable, isn't it better to walk in the Father's wealth? It will satisfy, it's available, he's waiting, even for those who know better and they still didn't do the right thing. Well, you don't know what I did. Okay, but I know the Father. I know the Father. And so what happens is Satan's going to try to get you in your flesh. And you're going to think about all the things why God shouldn't. And when he does that, you just remember who the Father is. Because it doesn't really matter what you did. It matters who the Father is. That is where the attention should be. It only takes a moment to mess up. And sometimes it feels like you never get out of it. But the Father. But the Father. So let's wrap things up today. Verse 21 said, I have sinned against heaven and in your sight. No longer worthy to be called your son. And so there's two things I want to say with this as we get ready to close out here. The first thing, we were never worthy to be called his son. We never were. From the get-go, we never were worthy to be called his son. We were born in sin. We are sinners. We were just never worthy of that. So and here's the thing, why I'm bringing that up is because when we mess up, this is what we always say to ourselves. I'm no longer worthy. I've messed up too big. You never were worthy. So that's an irrelevant point. It's moot. Rather, he makes us worthy. He made us worthy when we got saved and we turned to him and he covered us in his blood. He also still makes us worthy now as Christians when we mess up on purpose or an accident and when we mess up too big. It's still him. It's not, well, he saved me initially, but I got to get my act in order and I got to never mess up. Well, good luck with that. Anyways, so then the second thing I want to say is our worthiness doesn't come from our not messing up, but what the Father says. And this is big. Let's go immediately from this to the very next verse. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. But the Father told his servants, quick, bring out the best robe and put it on him. See, our worthiness doesn't come from some affirmation that I say to myself. It doesn't come from how I view myself. It doesn't come from how other people view me. It comes from what the Father says about me. And the Father said, you're my son. This is the changing point. This is the big point. Our worthiness does not come from not messing up. It never did and it never will. Even when we aren't totally right with how we come to him. Did you notice how the Son came and he did not come right? He didn't say all the right words. He didn't have all the right attitude. He didn't have his act together. He didn't even have anything to offer the Father. Did you see that? He just came and he said this fumbling thing and it was partly true, partly a little bit askew. He didn't quite get the whole idea. And he still didn't ask for grace. Can you just forgive me? Sorry I ruined your name and reputation. He never says that. The Jews are waiting for the father to strike his son. Even when we don't totally come with all the right attitude and thoughts, and our prayer is not perfect, and we just come to God, he still accepts us there. He still accepts us there. Still. And even when we're ashamed or we're really messed up, he still meets us there. And this is what we can expect from the Father. Let's pray. Lord, I pray that you'd come to us in our strength and as well as our weakness. Help us to be quick to seek you, not just in our moments of despair, but also in our moments of courage. When we've got everything held on together, we've got it all held tight. Work's great, life's great, family's great, everybody's healthy and happy. We've got the stars in our hands. Help us to still trust you and to still turn towards you, Lord. Because we're not seeking you so that we can be a better citizen. We're seeking you, God, because we are rebels in our heart. Our fathers were rebels. Even your children Israel were rebels. We've been rebels since Adam and Eve. Lord, and we need you and your forgiveness. We need your compassion. So, Lord, in our times of weakness, come near to us, but also, Lord, in our times of strength, come near to us. Come near to us, God. Lord, help us to depend on you with big things and with little things. With our past and with our future. Lord, that we would depend on you. And Lord, whenever we go through a struggle, help us to always remember what you say and not what we're thinking. That even as you showed us in your temptations, Lord, that we would put a silence to the voice of the enemy and would meet it with the truth of your word. That, yeah, I have messed up too much to be called a son. But it was never about that. And you call those sons who come to you. If anybody needs prayer for anything, maybe you're traveling or sickness or anything, you just feel like maybe your walk with God's gotten a little bit shallow. Just in case, if there's anybody here who has never actually accepted Jesus, anything like that, or maybe you're just sick, maybe you're dealing with a situation, maybe you're looking for a job, anything that you just need prayer for. We're just going to take a couple minutes if you want to come to the front, and we'll pray for you. We're not looking down on you. We're here as a body to lift one another up. We're just going to give it just a couple minutes. I want to make sure if there's anybody at all, that we don't leave this place without serving you. Just give it a couple more minutes just in case. Lord, thank you for your goodness. As we close out in prayer, I want to, for just a moment, I'd like to, please join me in prayer. We're going to address very quickly the people online who are watching, just in case there's somebody who's watching who would like to receive Jesus. That might seem odd to those people who are here, but I'd rather be safe than sorry. Accepting Jesus is nothing mystical. There's no perfect prayer. It just looks like this. God, I'm a rebel in my heart. Please forgive me. I want to follow you. It's that simple. It's not a perfect prayer. It's not words you recite. It's coming to God and saying, you are my only hope. And I know that your blood will forgive me, God. If you are watching this and you have decided to make a decision, please reach out to our offices. I'd love to talk. I can give you a free Bible. Or maybe if you just need prayer. Or maybe you just want to talk. Now for those who are here, I just want to pray for you. Lord, I pray you'd bless those who are here. God, guide their life. Give them peace. Fill their lives and their hearts with joy. That during the holiday season they would walk in your peace. That they wouldn't be overcome with all the troubles around us, Lord. And we know, as your word says, that it's the troubles around us that can steal our joy and kill our seed. So, Lord, I pray you'd guide them, watch out for them, protect them and defend them, guide them forward and bless them in everything they do. May you be a shield for them and a blessing for them, Lord, that you'd lift up their feet, lift up their weary heads, and bless them in this time. We love you, Lord. Amen.